And welcome back to the Baseball Development Hub podcast. My name is Trevor Powers, and I am joined, as always, on this podcast by co-host Dan Galati. Dan, we already exchanged pleasantries. This is take two. We had somewhat of technical difficulties, so let's just get right into the conversation and ignore the small talk for our listeners that didn't get to hear it the first time. There's a lot of baseball still going on, even though it feels like winter here in North Carolina, as we talked about in take one, with the World Series specifically, and we're going to talk about the Blue Jays a little bit later in this episode and some of the offensive development things that they have done that has led to a lot of success this year. But first, the big news across college baseball was obviously Tony Vitello's flirtation into relationship with the San Francisco Giants. One of the big questions that a lot of people have is what's Tennessee going to do next? They've officially announced Josh Elander as their head coach. We don't want to have that conversation. There's a lot of good baseball people out there that are having that conversation about what's the future of Tennessee baseball looks like and how Tony Vitello left it better than he found it. That's 100% true. But today I kind of want to have a conversation based around whether a college baseball head coach making the transition into Major League Baseball can be successful, because there is different parts of the game. I think what makes Tony a really good head coach is the fact that he's a really good recruiter, and there's no recruiting in Major League Baseball at the end of the day outside of the occasional free agent, but that's about how much you pay them. So when I ask you that question of whether a college baseball head coach making the transition right into Major League Baseball as a manager can be successful, what's your gut reaction?
Yeah, I think that my gut answer is yes. I think that there might need to be some patience on the end of the San Francisco Giants. We've never seen a sitting college head coach go straight to being a sitting major league manager. But I think, so I think there's definitely some differences, just like the day-to-day is going to be different for him. As you mentioned, you're not recruiting your roster anymore. You have a front office that handles all of that. You're given a roster. You have, obviously, I'm sure there's a good relationship there with the front office, so they wouldn't hire you. So you'll have some say in what types of guys you think are going to be, good with the other guys you have under contract. And then it's just, what can you do with this roster? Can you, put the guys in the right position to succeed as far as lineup construction, pitching decisions, things like that. I'll also be interested to see what kind of staff he puts together around him, because I think, in a situation like this, a bench coach is some people think bench coaches don't do anything. They can be pretty important because they're almost like the right-hand man and the manager a lot of times. So if they have someone with a little experience in there that has been in a big league dugout a little more. But listen, Tony Vitello is a baseball coach, so he's going to be a manager. I don't think there's a reason why he couldn't be successful necessarily. There's no guarantee. But I think, just some of the differences of dealing with some of the, dealing with the players is a little bit different at the same time, because you didn't recruit them. You don't have a relationship with them for, the power dynamics almost a little bit different because you're not getting paid more than the players. And I know in college baseball, you were starting to get introduced to a little bit of that. Your roster was starting to get money. They were starting to be paid commodities, which makes people feel a little more entitled to things. And then when you turn it to the big leagues, those guys certainly are entitled. They've been through a lot. They've been through college. They've been through the minor leagues, or they feel like they, deserve a little bit more leeway. They're a little more set in their ways. You're not going to shape them as much because you're talking about, full-grown adults in their 30s a lot of times. You're not going to teach them too much. So it's not as much about development as maybe it was at Tennessee. Now, one would argue that you coach at Tennessee, you're not developing those guys. You're getting the best players and you're just rolling them out there. So I think the long and short of it is, I think he can be successful. How successful, I don't know if anyone can give you a guarantee on that. And I think a lot of it depends on how the structure around him is. And I kind of believe that with every manager in Major League Baseball, right? How many times have you seen managers maybe not work out, get fired, and then go to a better situation as far as, health of the organization, front office, scouting, things like that. And then they're successful. And just because of my local, obviously, ties and bias to it, like I always think of Terry Francona, who his first Major League Manager job was with the Phillies. They weren't very successful, kind of got, he got fired because they weren't winning. I don't know if they were good enough to be winning, but because he was in a bad situation. And now look at the career that Terry Francona has had as a Major League Manager. So if the Giants want to be patient with him, I think he can. I certainly think he has the temperament to be a player's coach. So a guy who can manage kind of, Major League egos, for lack of a better term, personalities, I guess is probably the better way to put it. But I think he can. It's just how patient are they willing to be? And what's the structure like around them? How healthy is that organization? Are they, we've seen them kind of try and fail in previous off seasons to land the big name free agents. They obviously make the big splash for Devers last year. It kind of falls short of making the playoffs this year. So like, I don't know if they're a Tony Vitello short of reaching their goals. I think they have some roster stuff they have to clean up, because for me in Major League Baseball, it's a lot more about the roster than it is about the manager.
Yeah, and I'll start kind of on that last point. Is the one thing I've always said about coaching, I mean, this is coaching in every sport. Some sports it's different than others, but specifically in baseball, is there's no scheme, there's no play calling, there's no structure in terms of like how we play defense and how we call the offense and our creativity and our ability to get our playmakers the ball in space, or are we running a pick and roll, or however we're running our systems on both sides of the ball. Baseball is throw the gloves out, talent wins, right? So I've always believed that managers, and even to a lesser extent head coaches in college baseball, are predicated on their talent level, right? And now how do you put those guys in a position to be successful is a completely different conversation. But I think that's more of a college baseball thing than it is a Major League Baseball thing. And so I say all that to say that there's going to be a learning curve for Tony Vitello. Now, how long is that learning curve? And I don't know. But I also will say, just because the structure of professional baseball is completely different than college baseball, the recruiting element, the player development side of things is completely different, which is where they were actually, you say they recruit really good players, but they also developed really well at Tennessee and got their guys in a position to be better, each and every guy that stepped on campus. So they're obviously not going to have as much time with the athletes to do the development side of things, which I think is something that Tony was obviously very successful with, or at least Coach Anderson and Coach Elander were put in a position to be very successful in. But I will say all that just to say that I don't think Tony's learning curve is going to be any different than when a bench coach makes his first managerial opportunity in the major leagues, or a hitting coach takes the step up from hitting coach to manager, right? The reason I say that is because I don't think there's a difference in, let's just say, like the major league decision making, right? Like it's still coaching baseball. There's the calendar, there's the personalities, there's the, just doing it every day, playing every day, how you give their guys their rest day. So maybe being a fly on the wall as a hitting coach compared to being a college head coach during that kind of developmental phase as you're transitioning into your managerial opportunities. Sure, maybe do you learn how to have those conversations and how to balance those things that really come into play to make sure your guys are trusting you and you're really putting them in a position to be successful. But again, that's no different. That gut feel, quote unquote, that decision making of who to go to here, when to have that conversation with this player, all of those things are things every manager, first-time manager in the major leagues, has to learn on the fly. And I think Tony is as good as anybody to learn that in a rapid fashion. I think if there's anything that I think you can tell, one of the things that, Tony kind of broke onto the scene with the Bad Boy 2021 team. That was, yeah. And everybody kind of thought that was who he was. And I think what we've learned over the years is that was who he felt like he needed to be to get Tennessee to take that next step. And I really think that's fascinating. Now, again, I think that's a bit or a strategy that's probably better in college baseball. I don't think professionals need the bad boy head coach who then turns into the nice guy head coach, who then turns into the great public speaker, doing your podcast tours, doing your ABCA presentations. Like, I think college guys gravitate towards that a little bit more than professional guys do. But I think what Tony has shown is that he's a very good chameleon, as we say, which is very important in leadership, that he's able to adapt what his players need to what he's doing. And again, how does that translate directly into Major League Baseball? I don't know, but he's very transparent. He's a very good speaker in terms of how he goes about being honest. I thought his remarks leaving Tennessee showed that, of just like the mix of humor, the mix of being brutal honesty, of saying this was a selfish decision. This wasn't about San Francisco. This wasn't about Tennessee. This was about me and my goals and my opportunity to coach in Major League Baseball and my love for, being successful at every level, right? And I think we need more of that in a lot of different places in this world, of just transparency. But it is kind of cool to see, and I think that kind of leadership is going to translate. So I know I wasn't really structured there. I was kind of just unfiltered thoughts there for a second on the differences of managing a college program and managing a major league program. But I do think there are boxes that he definitely checks, and I think there are going to be things that we need to see if he's going to be able to check that. But I don't think it's a 100% either way, that he's definitely going to be successful or that he's not. But while there are people that will make those statements in, written in stone.
Yeah, and I think you make a good point about his personality, because I think that's so much about what matters with major league managers. Again, it's like, can your personality get guys to kind of stay even keeled and stay focused over the course of what is an absolute, just, really tough 162 game season, 6 months of showing up every day, the travel schedule, like obviously like those parts of, I think, Major League Baseball and the managing, like everyone looks at the in-game stuff. And I think now even more so with a designated, as crazy as, I can't believe I'm going to make this point, but with a designated hitter, there's almost less that a manager has to do nowadays, because, you're not worried about what if my pitcher comes up to hit in a big spot in the game, and, what's our bullpen tax look like all that stuff. Like it's mostly just like lineup decisions, pitching decisions, like when's the time to pull the right trigger on going to the mound and getting a guy out, who's the right guy to go to. And those are things that I think will take some reps, and that's where some of the patience comes in, is like, you might not be perfect with some of that. We've seen some first time managers struggle with that. Now, I don't exactly know how the Giants are structured. There's some organizations where a lot of that is kind of given to the manager for them to kind of execute from up above. I don't know how the Giants structure actually works. If they do it the way that I think most of the successful organizations do it, he has kind of the final say on that. He's given information, and then he uses that information how he pleases to make those decisions. And that could take reps. But again, like you made the point of a hitting coach becoming a big league manager for the first time, or bench coach. How about a guy like Stephen Vogt, who went from player to manager right now? And I know he's been in a big league clubhouse for years and years. He had a really long playing career, so he kind of understands that day to day. But I don't think Tony Vitello is kind of blind to it. I don't think he doesn't understand it. And again, if you put the right staff around him of people who have been through it, and a bench coach who has been through it, and things like that, then he just gets even more help with that. So I just think that his personality, his competitiveness, the way he clearly can kind of fit the vibe of whatever he feels the team needs. And again, like you said, I don't know if big leaguers need that bad boy, a whole day where the entire starting lineup's not in the lineup like he did in the midweek, like to get them going and to kind of light a fire. Big leaguers don't need that type of stuff. He doesn't have to be that guy, but we've seen him be the player's coach. We've seen him be the guy who kind of is the nice guy, like you said. And I think that because of his personality and the way he's been able to kind of do that, then he does have a chance to be successful. And again, like we put too much credit. We give too much credit and we give too much blame towards big league managers sometimes. Like so much of it is organizational structure and your roster. Like you're not getting a big league managerial job if you aren't halfway decent. I mean, again, another example, and I'm going to keep using Phillies examples because the ones on top of my head. And obviously it didn't end up working out with Gabe Kapler in San Francisco either. But like Gabe Kapler did leave the Phillies where he was run out of town because he wasn't a fit, which is fair. And the organizational structure around him wasn't in place in a good spot at the time. But the first year after he coaches in Philadelphia, he wins 107 games with the Giants. The next year and 2 years later, he's fired because he doesn't repeat that success. So like, again, how much of that is on him and because of him, and how much of it is because of organizational structure and roster construction? Like I don't know. Now, again, when you're one of the best to do it, Terry Francona, Bruce Bochy, you are adding value. But again, like you look at Bruce Bochy when he was with the Giants and then that year in Texas, like the roster construction and the organizational structure in both those places where he's won a billion World Series have been really strong and in a really good place. So like you can't, again, the Giants need to be patient with him.
Yeah. And they need to build a good roster around him is kind of what you're saying there too as well, right? Like I think that's probably the biggest takeaway that I could put in any conversation. I mean, you talk about, the Terry Franconas of the world and obviously the Bruce Bochy's of the world, and they're able to flip a switch in an org, but I think that's built through, like, people want to act like that's built through lineup decisions and that's built through bullpen decisions and management, or maybe the somewhat, impression they have on building the roster, which I don't think is a thing. I think what those guys do a really good job of is keeping the temperament of the clubhouse. Right. I think that's genuinely what it comes down to. Is a guy like Francona comes in, he instills confidence in the 25 to 40 guys that roll through that clubhouse door. He has conversations when it needs to be frank. He has a frank conversation when it needs to be positive. He puts his arm around a young guy and he's able to get the most out of those guys. And that's what big league managers are, right? They are really good leaders, and leaders in every aspect of life are usually going to translate into another industry field and put themselves in a position in the org that they're with in a position to be successful. And I think Tony's shown the ability to be a leader, an adaptable leader, a player's coach, have those hard conversations. Like you said, when he benches the whole starting nine, that's probably takes some rough conversation with some guys that have played a lot of baseball, but also the fun conversations. Make sure the young guys are playing well, playing free, playing loose. And I think that's where it's going to be really important, but that's going to take experience. And when you have those guys, the veterans that actually seemingly make a difference, right? Take an 80-win club to a 95-win club, and the only main transition was the new skipper walking through the door. It's just the ability to press the right clubhouse buttons. It's not press the right bullpen buttons. It's not press the right lineup card buttons. Because if you put those players in a position where they're mentally in prepared, right? They know what the expectation is. They're not disappointed when they're being pulled at 70 pitches because you've had that conversation with them. You've built those relationships with them. All of those things, that's when managers become successful immediately. And again, I think that's going to take some give and take and some time for Tony to really hone in on how to have that conversation. Tony's not old, right? So like if he's having a conversation with a 35-year-old when he's what? And I don't know. Do you know how old Tony is by any chance?
No.
No, he can't be more than 45. With ages. Yeah. He can't be older than 45. I'm going off the head here. It's like the ability to have the conversation with an adult with kids versus the Drew Gilberts of the world, who he's obviously going to be coaching. And that's different, right? That's different. Those guys have different expectations. Those guys have different responsibilities and different parts of their game. And there's a way to have a conversation with a 22-year-old versus a 35-year-old. And those are all just going to take reps. And I think the guys like Terry Francona and Bruce Bochy that make the largest difference immediately just know how to have that conversation because they've been in the game for so long. They have so many reps. They've probably made so many mistakes in those situations, and they've learned from it. Tony's going to have to learn from it, no different, but his success is going to be determined by their ability to build a good roster, to have good depth, to have the opportunity to withstand injuries, because that's kind of what has been, the Giants' bugaboo has been like, yeah, they have some good players, but really when you get into the depth, they're nowhere near close to where they were when they were winning multiple World Series. That's going to be the difference of whether he's coaching Arkansas in 3 years or whether he's sticking around in the big leagues for the next 5 to 10.
Knife through the heart of Tennessee fans with the coach in Arkansas. Yeah, and I just think that when you talk about lineup decisions and pitching decisions, it's like you only talk about those decisions and moves when they usually don't work out, because that's just how we are as a viewers. But B, when there's a decision to be made, right? When your roster is good enough to have a decision to be made, when there is a difference between player A and player B, and like it could matter. But if player B, there isn't going to be an argument if player B isn't, comparable to player A. If you don't have that, if you only have 9 guys that clearly can be the only ones that roll out there every day, because you're just not that good enough. And like you said, the depth isn't there, then no one's going to complain about those decisions. So Yeah, it's going to take reps. And I think the point about being able to understand and have different kind of sounding and types of conversations with like a Rafael Devers as it is going to be with a Drew Gilbert. Sure. But I think I would imagine that the Giants understand that. And a guy like Buster Posey, who's making these decisions for the Giants, who played in a big league clubhouse, who's had to have those decisions, probably understands that. And they're not going to make a hire. And I also think Tony has the kind of emotional intelligence to be able to um, know that he has to talk to certain guys certain ways. And, have to earn their respect, obviously, especially the veterans that come in there. Um, Verlander is a free agent, but I would think about like the fact that he's, him and Verlander are very close in age, and Verlander was on that roster last year. So like, that's an interesting one. But again, we've seen it happen. You've seen other sports coaches go right from college to the pros. You've seen younger coaches in professional levels. Sean McVay is like everyone's favorite football coach in the NFL. I'm pretty sure he was like 32 when he was a head coach. Um, Again, football is very, very, very different, especially when you're a guy like Sean McVay who's designing and calling the plays. And Tony Vitello is not going to be able to do that. But again, like the biggest thing that a big league manager does is make sure that he can get a team through 162 games, staying focused, playing kind of, not super high, super low baseball, like kind of consistent in the middle, flatline baseball for 162, which when you boil it down to it makes baseball sound really boring and stupid. And I apologize. I don't mean to do that. Like the 162 is one of my favorite parts about baseball. Just because it's so constant and it's so consistent every night. But like that is the most important thing. It's like, can you, and Joe Madden used to talk about this all the time when he had those super talented Cub teams, like when he felt like guys were pressing or the vibes were getting too low, he would lock them out of the clubhouse and tell them not to show up until much later in the day. Cause it's like, you guys just need a break. Like it's July and you guys have been here every day since February. Like take a breather. So that'll be a difference for him. And that'll be something that, I think is the most important part about his tenure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, really, I hate to downplay what MLB managers do because I'm sure it's an exhausting job that comes with 162, as exhausting mentally as it is for players. It's just as exhausting for managers, and they don't really get off days. And, there's the pressure and the media and everything that kind of comes with it. But really, to me, as somebody who's, really bared down on some teams that have underperformed when the Nationals were going through that stretch and some bad managerial hires. Really, I think the main goal of an MLB manager is to avoid an insurrection, right? And when you're dealing with adults with personalities and egos, it happens, and it happens a lot. It happens to good coaches. Like I would bet my life savings there's been insurrection-esque things that have happened in clubhouses where it's good coaches and good teams, and just the oil and water mixture at that point of a long season and some bad injuries and some bad luck, and next thing you know, a team hates each other. But that's really what managing an MLB team comes down to. And I'm not even saying that, because people will be like, oh, well, the front office makes all the lineup decisions and bullpen. I'm not even factoring in that. Like, I just think baseball is such a long game and it's a marathon that if you ride the emotional roller coaster of a season, you're probably going to be putting your team in a position to be unsuccessful because they're also going to ride that roller coaster. You need to be able to play the long game. And that's probably the biggest thing that I will say is probably I need to see Coach Vitello be able to execute on, is just the reality that like it is a different beast. 162 compared to 56, right? Playing every day compared to playing, Wednesday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, right? However the schedule maps out. That's different. And I'm sure that's going to be exhausting, just as exhausting for him as it is going to be for the players in year one and everything that comes into it. I will say that is something that people want to say, the boys club of professional baseball, because there are people that believe that a college baseball coach is a glorified high school coach, yada, yada, yada. That is the biggest difference that I do think it's going to take. Like, there's definitely going to be a moment in August where he looks in the mirror and he's like, holy cow, this is long. And we still got 40 games to play. Yeah. Like we still got 40 for
almost a full college season.
Yeah. Like there are definitely going to be that's got to be the biggest thing, is preparing for the marathon that comes with professional baseball, and being a hitting coach, bench coach, third base coach, outfield coach, bullpen catcher. like being able to go through that 162, even Stephen Vogt, like you used, for example, as a player, being able to like just live that, that's different. Tony Vitello's never lived 162, and that's going to be a tough transition. But I think from a baseball chops, he's a smart dude. I think he's a great leader. I know most people think of Tony Vitello and they see the fiery guy. From my opinion of people that have known him, to also listening to him speak. We've never obviously been around him. He seems like a humble guy, which I think humility is very important when you're going to take this. I think he's going to be willing to learn. I think he's going to be willing to have a bench coach who has 10 plus years of managerial experience, or at the very least bench coach into managerial back to a bench coach experience. So I would anticipate that the Giants are going to surround him with people, pitching coaches with a lot of experience, that are going to put him in a position where he isn't alone in the decision making, at least at the beginning part of the year. And then once it comes time for him to fully be confident in what he's doing, he's going to be ready and prepared.
Yeah, yes. And that's why there's going to need to be some organizational patience from the Giants, which, again, I don't think they make this hire without understanding that. And I just can't, the 162 of it is going to be the biggest test. And, the baseball acumen thing, it's not even a conversation. It doesn't. To be honest with you, it's
in college baseball, it's more important to know when to bunt, when to run, when to move runners, because that pressure that you can put on your opponent they're prone to more mistakes in college baseball. We can't strike out as much. We can't, we have to move runners. We have to be active on the base pass, and we have to control the run game better. I mean, there's no pickoff rules in college, right? We have to understand bunt coverages.
Who the Giants surrounding him with? He's not going to be alone in the dugout.
No, not at all.
And again, and at the college level, it's not like he doesn't have those. The Giants wouldn't make this hire just for fun.
Yeah.
The Giants are making this hire. They've interviewed him. They know that he has the baseball chops. We've all seen it. Again, he's turned Tennessee into one of the best programs, if not the kind of standard bearer. Well, I guess LSU technically would be, but Tennessee and LSU have been, over the course of Vitello's kind of tenure at Tennessee, it's those are the two teams that you look at and you're these are the two best teams in the country. And it's so he turned Tennessee into that. He clearly knows what he's doing. Is the organizational structure sturdy? Is it in a good place? Will they have patience with him? How does he react to 162? Can he kind of manage the personalities in the clubhouse, which I honestly think might be one of his strengths?
I think 100%. I do believe that is a question mark right now, but it's a question mark that I would write in pretty confidence that he is. It's more of instead of being can he handle the personalities? It's I think he will handle the personalities, right? With a question at the end, just again, which he's 47, which I was surprised about. He's 47, so he's a little bit older than I anticipated, but I think his ability to connect with people is it's one of his superpowers. And I think that actually kind of brings me, and this will be the last point I'll make. One of the reasons Tennessee is what they are and was what they were under Tony Vitello is recruiting and player development. That is the two things that that was why when his name was first brought up for this position, I was kind of I don't know, because if your best attribute is recruiting, which is what Tony has made a career off of from Missouri all the way through TCU to Arkansas to Tennessee, all those stops along the way, you don't get to recruit, right? In professional baseball. If that's your superpower, you should probably stick in college baseball. The other thing Tennessee did a really good job of was player development, right? That park was small, but on the pitching side, they had multiple 100-mile-per-hour arms, what Frank Anderson had done, what Josh Elander had done on the offensive side. That was obviously, you got to give credit to Tony, even though his assistants are really good. You build that structure of player development. You don't have the player development opportunities in professional baseball. You don't spend the winter with them. You don't structure their fall and their off season. They're kind of on their own independent. And then obviously you're signing contracts and getting guys through the door, and it's to get ready for game 1 and 162. And however you get those guys in a position to be the best version of themselves is what you have to do. That's probably the thing that brings me the most pause, that if we're in 2027 2028, I doubt he's fired after 2 years unless it goes really haywire. If he's in 2028 and DVH is hanging up the cleats and you start to hear murmurs of him coming back, or let's just say Tennessee, he wants to come back to Tennessee, whatever it is, and he's back in college baseball, I will say it's more than likely because his best attribute is recruiting and player development, and in professional baseball, you don't get that. But all those other things, like you said, I mean, those are question marks. I think his ability to connect with people is going to be a strong suit of his. But I will say the thing that made Tennessee special is something that he won't be able to showcase in professional baseball. So that if there's anything that says that he's going to be back in college baseball and this is going to be a failure, it's just because of that.
Yeah, completely agree. But, and again, so much of it is to left to be seen. I have no reason to doubt him at this time. Like, and that's not to go and say that he's going to be manager of the year next year and they're going to win 100 games or even make the playoffs. I just don't.
Probably not because they're not that
net
good.
Negative. Right. That's right.
Like,
right. I don't see him being brought in being a net negative. I don't.
To me, this is, if he turns it around in there like Kapler did, I mean, I would be so impressed. But to me, I don't see this working out immediately, at least. Definitely not immediately, just because I don't think that team is that good. That's it. It has nothing to do with Tony. It has nothing to do with his ability to lead. I just don't think that org has been the well-oiled machine that our teenage years told us they should be.
And they were, I mean, they also have some young guys on the roster who are making impacts at the big level. They have a couple more guys they want to come up and do that. And then so that, maybe that's part of why they thought he would be a good fit, because there are going to be some younger guys that they want to kind of influx. But like any big league team, it's not going to be all young guys. It's going to be a mixture of veterans. As previously stated, Rafael Devers is on their team.
And he really left Boston in a shining
and
light.
Didn't perform great in San Francisco. So it'll be
there's going to be some challenges.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. But again, I just don't see. I'm sure there's going to be Tennessee fans when we're in May and they're rolling, and he's flirting with 500. And his fans are like, why would he ever want to leave that for this? Or this for that? But I think if they're patient, it's going to work out. I really do. I think he's a good coach.
Yeah, and I think definitely a good baseball coach. From all intents and purposes, a good leader, a good connector of people. And those are going to be the things. Open-minded, right? Like, obviously, he's going to have to come in and be open to what the book says and the analytics and working in tandem with the general manager and what they want to do in terms of lineup construction and how they put their roster in a position to be successful. I think he's going to be a rock star in all those avenues. I really do. It's just if they win or not, it's not going to be based on – he's not this magic pill that just comes in and flips up an okay roster into a 107 win roster. Or he could, because baseball's weird and confidence is weird and momentum's weird. Dan, let's hit on a little bit of the World Series. As we record this and the episode will be out, I don't believe they play tonight. Series is tied 1-1. And part of the news since been the Blue Jays and their offense. And we talked a little bit a couple weeks ago about how, a little bit of their offense is predicated on, grind out at bats and putting the ball in play and not striking out. One of the things that, has been a buzzy topic has been their emphasis on bat speed and the development of bat speed and how they've done it in a way that has allowed this offense to perform even with aging assets. And hitting coaches, David Popkins' first year with the Blue Jays. And it's been a big topic, and I think it's one that has created this divide between old school and new school, as does everything in baseball. That's news to me. What's kind of your initial take on it? Because obviously we had a pretty, I don't want to say animated, but deep discussion about bat speed. And I have a take on this, but what's your kind of initial feel as this has become a very big thing this week in professional baseball about the Blue Jays' emphasis on bat speed this offseason and obviously now translating into a World Series?
If you're not just training bat speed and only bat speed, you're an idiot. Am I doing that right? Yeah. No, I think that it's a fascinating. Again, it's just like everything else. Like, it's a balance of things, and bat speed is. And I think we said this when we talked about bat speed a couple of months ago on here. It's like bat speed is one single tool to help build the engine of a good hitter, right? And we talked about all the things that go with it. Like, are you in the right position then to create the bat speed? If you're only generating and chasing bat speed, then you're going to miss the boat. Like, it's not just about how hard you can swing, right? Like, yes, you need to be able to rotate at a powerful rate. Yes, you need to be able to swing the bat faster. You're never going to catch up to 100 miles an hour. Like, there are certain things and there's baselines to all these things, but it's not the end all be all. And again, I think what's the Blue Jays have done and done a really good job of is they have taken this team-wide approach of they are going to be hard to strike out. They're not going to chase a ton of pitches. And within that, they're going to develop bat speed so that they're not just, swinging wet paper towels and making contact, right? Because you can build this approach out and it's great. Like,
Yeah.
it's fantastic. If every team in the league could be like, we're not going to chase and we're not going to strike out, they would do it. And you can be a grinding team, but I think what some people lose is some guys don't have the ability to grind at bats and still impact the baseball. You have to be able to, if you're going to have that philosophy, you're going to have to still be able to impact the baseball. And sometimes what you see with these chase teams is they have lineups filled with guys, teams that swing and miss a lot, teams that chase, is they're filled with guys who they have to kind of have that approach in order to impact the baseball. Because, some of the issues that the Blue Jays had during the regular season with their offense when they went into lulls, and they had terrific success, but there was a patch in the summer there. Might have been right after they took first place, I think in early June, where their offense kind of fell off and they're averaging like 2-point-something runs per game for a stretch of time. And the complaint was they don't have anyone who impacts the baseball. And when you look at it at the time, like the big free agent acquisition that they signed, Anthony Santander was injured, had gotten off to a horrible start. Vlad wasn't hitting for power. George Springer was having a great year. He's kind of been the outlier all year. I think he's a big guy you probably want to mention. But like some of the other guys they weren't generating the power. They weren't impacting the baseball. The difference has been in the playoffs. Vlad has been impacting the baseball. George Springer has been impacting the baseball. They have been able to do it. So I think the bat speed thing is like, if we're going to build this team-wide approach where we're going to be, contact-oriented, hard to strike out, grind out at bat teams, you better have some bat speed to come with it so that when you are making contact, you're going to find some barrel.
Yeah, I think baseball society is very frustrating, especially on social media, which of course is where we're
Every
active
society
every
on social
day.
media is frustrating.
Well, 100%. Baseball being what we deem as, people neck deep in it and feel like we're intelligent and have these conversations, it can be frustrating because you're right. And I feel like even very, very successful MLB orgs, you'll see do this offseason. Driveline's going to get a lot of money from MLB orgs who want them to come in and do bat speed training for their teams just because they saw the Blue Jays do it. And we act like it is one thing that flips a switch. Yeah, and leads to again, remember the Royals' emphasis on bullpen. Right. And now we're the crazy thing. And I know that was a while ago now. I mean, we're 10 years removed from that. Now it's like people are like fawning themselves over the complete games. Good grief. It's freaking unbelievable. Like it's crazy. And now we're doing the same thing with bat speed, right? Like it's part of the equation, of course. But for every good situation where the Blue Jays have done it, again, Paul Goldschmidt is the example of a guy who went and spent all offseason emphasizing bat speed and got significantly worse. And whether that was injuries, bodies breaking down, whatever, he went from an MVP caliber player to a fringe rosterable player, right?
Well,
and then he had to, you go.
I think with Goldschmidt too, it's like guy on the decline trying to find something to 100%. Kind of see, right? Like he hasn't been the last couple of years in St. Louis wasn't the Paul Goldschmidt we were used to really since 22, right? So like he goes to a new team and he's trying to find answers.
Well, this was 22 and a 23. It was when he was still, I forget what year exactly. It was either 23 to 24.
22 and 23.
23. It was like he went and he did this thing to extend his career because it is accurate and it is right that like if he can maintain his bat speed, he'd probably still be the player. But again, like you said, it has to be done within the confines of a still successful mechanical structure and a still successful approach and a still successful, swing decisions and just all of the things that have to come within the confines of bat speed, right? And I think that's obviously probably the thing that's not being spoken about enough with the Blue Jays. And again, we don't have Popkins on the tube to talk about this and go into detail about it, but I would bet what they did was an emphasis on bat speed within the confines of what makes these guys successful. Like, hey, George Springer, you're getting up there in age. You're really smart. You've always had really good swing decisions. You've always been a pretty good, contact guy. Let's get a little bit harder on the gas pedal, but let's not change what makes you successful. Let's not break down your mechanics and do some crazy things, right? And I think every hitting coach worth their salt would tell you the same thing, right? If I'm in the cage and I think a guy needs more bat speed, I'm going to expose him to these things, but I'm not going to do it to break down everything that made him a somewhat successful hitter. And I think that's the thing that, like, this old school versus new school kind of conversation is, people, as always, with velocities, the same thing. They screenshot a graph that says slugging percentage goes up as bat speed goes up. Yes. That's right.
Same thing with easy velocity. Baseball would be if we could just
played it on a graph. Yeah.
Print graphs.
Yeah. And again, I'm not like, as we did when we had this bat speed conversation a couple of weeks ago, I'm not poo-pooing new age coaching. We wouldn't be a functioning business if it wasn't for tech and new age coaching and the ability to have these conversations. So you keyboard warriors that are really new age analytics guys, like we are trusted to have these conversations. But what they're also trusting us to have these conversations, what all these high-level coaches emphasize even more than just the tech and the new age focus, is the ability to do it within the confines of what's going to make your athlete successful and having a balance between, sure, at LSU, we chase velocity and a lot of our guys throw 95 miles per hour. But that's not everything, right? The first thing Jamie Tucko talked about, and this is the national champion winning LSU Tigers, who has multiple arms that get drafted in the first round and multiple arms that throw 100 miles per hour, is a core philosophy for them is mastering the strike zone. That was in the
winning
first
the line
3
of
minutes of the video.
Called it.
Yep, winning the line of scrimmage. So if you don't think for a second that like even really good player development orgs are emphasizing those things, but saying, hey, your 117 mile per hour bat speed is cute, but it's meaningless if you can't hit the baseball. And again, not to get too much on my tangent here, the perfect example of that, and I use the example in golf, the perfect example in that is college baseball. If you took every program's bat speed for every one of their athletes, it would not be an exact graph like they're showcasing at the Major League Baseball level. The reason why is because there's so much of a gap between the best and the worst that a kid can have a lot of bat speed, but he can be really bad in a couple different categories, like swing decisions, like contact ability, and all those things, and he could stink. I mean, we've heard it from multiple people that say our highest bat speed guy is our worst hitter. Multiple coaches have said that. Well, what's the difference at the major league level? Those guys are the 1% of the 1% of the 1%. So yes, we can get George Springer to emphasize bat speed because he's already elite in everything else. And that's even for the Joey Gallos of the world, right? Who had to pick up pitching because he couldn't make enough contact. That guy is special in how his ability to make contact and repeat mechanics, right? And these are the guys that swing and miss more than anybody. So you're allowed to take that golfer and say, you need to add club head speed because he's already elite at making contact with the ball. Baseball is no different. We can take the professional player and say, you're elite at making contact with the ball. Now we need to increase your intent and increase your bat speed, and it works. But what people don't understand is the damage of having these conversations is now it bleeds into the youth level where dad sees that and says, bat speed, bat speed, bat speed, because he wants the best for his kid and he wants the best for his travel team or he wants the best for his high school team. And we don't understand that there's a lot more nuance, which is why we have to have these conversations, that it's just not as simple as just add bat speed, you'll be better. The graph says so. Just add bat speed, you'll be better. Everybody should add bat speed. Yeah, no crap. But no different than velocity. Velocity is useless out of the strike zone. Bat speed's useless if you can't make contact with the baseball.
Yeah, and the point that you made in the when we had a bat speed conversation before was as a youth baseball player, the best way to have bat speed is in the weight room. But I think too, like you said, there's just so many outside factors, right? And you have to consider every factor when you're doing something. If we're going to turn baseball into a scientific thing, let's turn baseball into science. And like when you're working within science, you have to include every factor possible that can mess with whatever experiment or whatever you're working with or whatever your subject matter is. So if we're talking about hitting a baseball in this sense and we're going to make it scientific, we're going to turn it into something that we're plotting on a graph, like sure, slugging percentage is higher. The higher your bat speed, the higher your slugging percentage. Sure, that can correlate for a lot of guys, especially at the major league level, like you said. But like, let's now click the drop down area and add all of the other factors into it. Are you in a good position to swing? What's your swing decisions? That's the biggest point. I should have led with that one, like you said. Swing decision. This is number one. Great, you swing the bat 110 miles an hour. If it's a slider in the other batter's box, you just created a nice breeze for everybody on the field. Other than that, you're not doing anything, right? So like, what's your swing decision? The pitcher, the factor that's out there on the mound, that's the biggest factor within that is like, what's the pitcher doing to get you out? Again, location of the pitch, what type of stuff they have. Is it playing towards X, Y, and Z? There's so many factors that go into it that, again, you can't take one thing in the game of baseball. When we're talking about building the mechanic of either a thrower or a swinger, you can't take one thing and just lean all the way into that until you have this base. Yes, George Springer can increase his bat speed and increase production at the age of, is he 36, whatever, 34, 36, yes, however old he is. Because George Springer he's always in a good position to hit. Swing decisions are fantastic. Always been a good contact guy. Like all of those things already apply to George Springer. Been in the league, had the experience, knows how pitchers like to pitch it. Seen a lot of these guys before. Like you could go on and on and on and on. Knows how to handle his body through 162. Because imagine if you go in there with a guy who's never, let's take someone straight out of college and dump him into the professionals. And in that offseason between college and right into a big league season, all he did was train bat speed. That's all he did.
He wouldn't have a prayer.
Would his obliques hold up through 162? True. Like, you know what I mean? Like, George Springer knows how to take care of his body, knows how to handle it. Guy who's dealt with injuries and been through it. Like, that's even a factor. Like, every little thing matters. You can't just take one metric, one stat, one thing, and be like, this is the end all be all. And that's what makes the Blue Jays impressive, though. And this is being able to understand their roster, understand who needs what to make them better.
Well, and it makes George Springer impressive as well, is to be able to sacrifice, because he probably did sacrifice some parts of his game. Like, okay, maybe my strikeout rate's going to go up, but I'm 35 and I want to do it so that I can maintain a 450 slug, right? Or whatever it is. Maybe my average is going to go down, but I want, to increase my extra base hit percentage or some, whatever factor you want to go into it. And a veteran guy who understands himself and understands what makes him successful is able to do that a lot easier than a young guy who just wants to make an impression. And because again, that's what gives me pause in general, is now this is going to be the player development craze, right? And who's to say an 18-year-old who was just drafted, or let's say even a 22-year-old who's had success through AA, but maybe could use, as a 67 mile per hour bat speed guy, right? Or 72 mile per hour bat speed guy, whatever he is. And it's like, hey, like you're hitting 300, you're slugging 475. Like, we think you could be a 300, 400, 500 guy if you do this, because there are people in even the professional levels of the sport that will believe that and will change. And who's to say that doesn't make that guy a 220 hitter? And sure, maybe his slugging maintains or his extra base hit percentage goes up, but now you've just completely changed what that hitter does well. It all has to be within the confines of what they are already successful at and being like, hey, like, learn how to push the gas pedal down, right? 2-0, and you think there's a high percentage you're going to get a breaking ball for a strike. Yeah. Push your intent a little bit. Try to put it into the upper decks of the stadium. But then when we get to 2 strikes, we have to be able to flip that switch backwards and go, okay, this guy's a really tough. Joey Votto is a great example. He's like, when he used to face Clayton Kershaw, he used to choke up like 16 inches up the bat, right? It's just being able to be adaptable, know when to use more bat speed, know when to use less bat speed. And really that just comes down to intent, quite frankly, like in knowing when to put the intent behind it, knowing when to pull back the intent behind it. And I think the last thing I'd say too about the graphs is, in this big picture, the graph looks where it goes up as bat speed goes up. But the thing I would, push caution to anybody who's seeing that graph is when you zoom it in, same thing with velocity, you zoom it in and you realize, oh, look at that little 92 there, right? Okay, that guy's got 92 in the tank is his average velocity. Well, he's got a really good ERA. And then what's this guy up here that throws 100?
Right.
Well, he's pitching to an 8. Why is that? Yeah,
right.
Sure. With the average bat speed, the slugging percentage goes up, batting average goes up, everything goes up. You know why? And this has always been the case. If you did this in the 1960s, if we could take the technology we had, the more bat speed a hitter had, the more successful they would be. Shohei Ohtani has great bat speed. Juan Soto has great bat speed. Aaron Judge has great bat speed, right? The best players in the league all have great bat speed. And they don't necessarily train it. They don't have an emphasis in their training program that is surrounded by that, right? So if you zoom it in and see what each player is, it's not an exact linear progression as bat speed goes up. Is there a causation behind it? Yes, if you take the average bat speed, they're going to be more successful the higher up you go. But that's not for every individual. And that's the pause that I would give as we're screenshotting graphs and we're saying that this is matter of fact, the situation is the ability to understand that just because it goes up as bat speed increases doesn't mean it's the best thing for every player, because players with lower bat speed can still be successful and hit for power. Alex Bregman's a great example, just had a career year, right, in Boston. Why? Because he's an individual as a hitter and he understands what works best for him. And then on the opposite end, there's players with more bat speed than you could even, hope and pray and train and try to get them to be, and they could stink because it's not an exact science right there.
Yeah, I think that's the important thing. It's like you mentioned Ohtani and you mentioned Judge and you mentioned Soto, and it's like, again, there's also like 17 other things that make those guys great. It's not just one. It's not just one thing.
Swing decisions, contact ability, all of those things. Yes. Being mutants.
No. Understanding, the pitch recognition, like which goes into swing decision, obviously as well. Like, yeah, there's too much. Anytime you get into and you just lock in on one, and we've all made the mistakes as coaches, right? Like there's times where you just lock in on one thing too much and everything else is like, that's not the most important thing right now. And, you talk about it in coaching, one of the buzziest phrases was always like treating the symptom, not the disease. You want to treat the disease, not the symptom, right? So it's just like, you got to be careful. And yes, bat speed is important, but just chasing bat speed is detrimental.
Yes. So that's a great point right there at the end there. That's a great point. I think it has a lot of positives, right? It decreases your reaction time, right? Like you're able to swing later, you're able to see pitches deeper, you're able to get to 100 easier. All of those things increase exit velocity. All of those things are great, but it has to be in the confines of what the individual is capable of doing. And it can't be just like, hey, go, like me and you, we could go out and chase bat speed right now. I could go train all off season and chase bat speed. Does that mean I just magically am going to get signed by an MLB org tomorrow? No, because I'm 5'8", 180 pounds, right? Like it's just not happening. So I think that's the big thing there. So Dan, pretty good conversation today. Any closing thoughts? Obviously we got a lot of World Series ball and everything going on. Any closing thoughts for our listeners?
Oh, everybody enjoy your week, getting close to Thanksgiving.
Yeah, getting closer, off season, got a ton of fun stuff planned. So make sure you're smashing that subscribe button, following the channel on all social channels. Obviously, this will be out on YouTube, podcast platforms as well. Got a ton of fun content that's continuing to come out and roll out. Got a lot of great trips planned as colleges wrap up their seasons, and obviously plan on having a ton of great conversations, whether it's on here, on the Backside Ground Balls Media YouTube channel, on social media as we continue to roll out our clips, player development centric. And if you want to learn something from really great coaches, but you don't want to sit and listen to us badger for an hour, or you don't have 30 minutes to watch, follow us on social media. You won't miss any of the clips. All the good stuff gets rolled out on there. So you get to see Dan's pretty face on a daily basis, which is what we all sign up for. So with that being said, we'll see you next time on the Baseball Development Hub podcast.